Hello and welcome in to the third installment video series of my Wheelhouse. Again, I'm back with you, Sheamus, your host, joining us from separate episodes, combining episode 1 and 2, Uncle Mike and my good friend Biddies. Gentlemen, how are we?
Doing well. I think my first Wheelhouse appearance back in the studio was the post-Thanksgiving episode. So
Really?
feels right to be here now.
Look at
Nice.
that timing. Mike, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was great. I thought it was pretty cool that you got a trophy over Thanksgiving or whatever it was. That was pretty cool.
That's
and
right.
It was like, and then I did it anonymously because I never would have given that to you. Well, we do in our house. We something I did for the last 12 years is whoever has the most attractive plate on Thanksgiving gets recognition. And Shay picked himself, but I didn't know. So it was like anonymously. I go through the 20 plates that are all sent to me in front of me, and I picked him. So he was right.
Yeah,
Although I almost made it a tie, because I thought Cassie's was real good too.
great plate. Cassidy had a great plate. This is maybe the first year I've ever competed in this competition. Usually I'm just mashed potatoes and turkey, a very gray plate.
So did you actually eat that plate that you set up?
I ate everything. It was delicious. Fantastic meal. But I'm very happy with my victory. I was calling my shot.
Yeah, you did.
I just knew. I had the feeling no other plate was in the same tier.
Anyways,
my plate was the Cade Cunningham of Thanksgiving plates, but we'll get to him later.
I'll have to send in a photo next year.
Yeah, yes, you will, definitely. So to get into it, the NBA offseason continues. Now we're probably somewhere at 98% of all free agents have signed with new or the same teams. The dust has settled on a lot of interesting movement, whether it's trade discussions and possibilities or moves that have been made, or in the case of certain players like Bogdanovich, been fumbled and remade somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I think just an overall all-encompassing conversation to discuss the Western Conference and Eastern Conference and really how we think it's shaking out in terms of what likely playoff teams we're looking at this point. Obviously, with this year, we're going to have a new ingredient in play come playoff time with this entry tournament, which we saw the successes of last year with Memphis and Portland in the play-in. I think that this year is going to be a really, really strong and perfect year to do that with a nice kind of tier that really does start around the 7 or 8 seed in both conferences, and you could argue goes all the way down to the 11th team in each conference. So I think it's a good year for that. Just to jump into it, before I did deep dives into the rosters and seeing what changes happened, how I expected a team to develop based on young players who I'm expecting growth from, or to depreciate based off of losses in free agency or older players falling off the map, I kind of just, before I dove in, I just did a top 8 on both sides. And I found that after my full research escapade, nothing changed in the Eastern Conference.
Nothing.
I mean, obviously I have a macro perspective of the moves that have been made and stuff like that. It's just before looking at everything in granular detail, I put the eight teams on the paper. The 8 teams that I'm ending up with that are going to stay the 8 teams are the same teams I had initially. The order changed a little bit at the top, but where I would like to start is in the Western Conference, where besides the top 2 teams, everything changed for me. I went from having a team that could have been 3 or 4 to being 7, and I have teams getting in the playoffs that I didn't even have in contention in my first dry up. So I would love to go into the Western Conference. I think that there's a clear tier at the top, and you can jump in if there's delineation, but I think it's Lakers and Clippers 1 and 2. Either both you guys with those numbers? No, Biddies is not with it.
No, I had to keep Lakers in the top spot. I think they've had really the best offseason you could hope for as a defending champ. Number 2, I went with Denver.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think there's some what's so interesting about them, and I think Boston is the same way in the East, is you have these 2 young superstars that still have room to grow. And I think that Denver could be in a different version of the 14-15 Warriors that kind of arrived a year earlier than a lot of people expected, have this unconventional superstar player. And just looking at all the things that went wrong for the Clippers once they entered the bubble, losing Harrell, and still some uncertainty about what the rest of the roster is going to look like from some other moves. I just have a better feeling about Denver coming into the season. So I went Lakers 1, Denver 2, Clippers 3. And
Okay.
I'll let you either.
Mike, where's Denver? We can touch on Denver, and then I'll give.
Hey, I
Mike
agree with everything that was said about Denver. It's hard to pick them above the Clippers, but I don't like the coaching change at the Clippers. I don't think Ty Lue has ever proven himself. If Doc had his hands full, Ty Lue's going to have his hands full. Denver, one thing that I'm kind of waffling on is who's got the advantage coming back? Do the teams that played well in the bubble coming back, do they have momentum going forward, even though they have a short period of time off? And Denver has certainly got momentum if it's under that situation. The way they played, I think they might be young enough where they're not in the same situation that LeBron is in with the Lakers, where he's probably still looking for more time off. So, some people are speculating that the teams that didn't play in the bubble or got out early because they've had so much more rest. But, geez, some of those teams, the last time they played was last March. And that's an awful long time in between playing with a short preseason going forward. So I can see Denver at 2. I think that's almost a flip of a coin, them and the Clippers. I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with Biddies picking that at 2. I think that's where I'll put them, at 2.
And one thing I forgot about Denver was they have maybe the biggest wild card in the league with Michael Porter Jr. because he could, in one scenario, be a reliable third option for them, or another scenario, be the centerpiece of a trade if Washington decides to move on from Brad Beal, or as we've seen over the last handful of years, superstars kind of surprisingly come on the market. And I could see Porter Jr. as the centerpiece to really turn Denver into a true contender.
He's still got a ways to go when you judge from the bubble. And Malone still doesn't have complete confidence in him. And there's times when he doesn't play when you would expect he would play. And there's times that he goes on the court and he doesn't quite seem ready to be the player that he should be, the number 3 option. So I don't think he's going to roll us defined there well enough. This could be his year going forward.
So with the reason I can see some level of validity with having Denver at 2, I think I have them at 6. And that's not to say I don't like Denver. It's just I think that besides the top-end talent that the Lakers and the Clippers have, and obviously there's dysfunction with the Clippers, and we know what that is, but if they have a relatively healthy season from Kawhi and Paul George, I see no reason that they couldn't be there. With Denver, I'm surprised with you having them as the second best seed that your first point of emphasis wasn't Michael Porter rather than the Jamal Murray and Jokic combo. I think what we saw in the playoffs and at their highest ceilings last season wasn't necessarily close to as good as you're going to get for Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic.
Real good.
Specifically with Jokic, I think he has more room to improve. But what we saw from Jamal Murray, I don't think he's going to perform at that level for the rest of his career. If he does, he's going to be one of the 15 best players in the league.
I think he's turned the corner in terms of being able to play under pressure situations, performing in the clutch.
But he's always been a good clutch performer.
They've got that. It's apparent that they've got a pretty tight team there. Guys that get along and guys that play together and guys that are looking to do more. I think they're hungry, and I think they proved to themselves that they can do it, that they're capable at this point. Where before Jamal Murray didn't seem to have the confidence. I like what Jamal Murray did.
So all of these threads interconnect. The hunger for more and Michael Porter being the X factor. Because of the departures that they had this offseason, Detroit didn't have to try too hard to pay a crazy amount of money to pry away the Nuggets backcourt in Plumlee and in Grant. And the Nuggets brought back JaMychal Green, and Paul Millsap returned on a lower number contract. But they lost not significant depth, but they lost depth in the front court for sure. And Michael Porter is going to have that role that you could tell he was hungry for last year, to the chagrin of the Nuggets' success.
You would have
at the
to
time.
say that Bol was a possibility.
Yeah, but isn't Bol more of a three? Isn't he going to back up at his peak? Like right now, their backup three is PJ Dozier. You know, right now Bol needs to.
I like PJ Dozier. I liked him when he was with the Celtics.
Me too, and I like the draft pick of RJ Hampton. He was
I like
fighting in the draft. He's a great cutter. I think he'll fit well with Jokic. But at the end of the day, I just think that I'm too nervous about Michael Porter. There's too many things. His mindset, his injury history, he seems too palatably unnerving for me to trust in any situation that he can become clearly this team's third best player, which they need him to be. And to blend it together, I'll just run through 1 through 8, and you guys can jump off from there. Saying I have Denver at 6, my top 8 is Lakers, Clippers, the Mavs are my 3 seed, Warriors are my 4, Blazers are my 5, Nuggets 6, and then I have a tier break, and I'm really struggling whether or not to include them in the playoffs at all, but I have the Rockets at 7, I think it's a possible situation that either Harden tanks himself or they get rid of some players and then they're in the lottery. And then my 8 seed, I have the Suns, but with a lot of teams on the perimeter there. But what I see just after this top tier talent in the conference that's returning, I think the Lakers could start slow because we've heard that LeBron is likely to be more rest heavy early in the season to expand on what weak and short length of an offseason he did have. I still think that they're going to carry through. The additions that they made should be able to sustain lower minute totals from him. But the real interest is in that Denver. I have Dallas, Golden State, and the Blazers. That's where the interest in this conference really lies for me. And I think that all of those teams are probably going to be within 3 or 4 wins of each other. I think a lot is going to depend on structure, system. I think things like continuity will matter, and that's an area where the Nuggets test pretty well. But I just think that when I'm trying to mock out how things are going to work and what depth is going to be needed in this roller coaster, very unusual ecosystem of a COVID season, we've seen how it impacts football already. I mean, if you're filling out your fantasy lineup, you can't play a single Raven or Steeler, and it could be for multiple weeks. And that's detrimental, not only to fans, but these teams' ability to have sustained success across the year. So I'm looking at teams that have a high ceiling because of their system. I'm looking for teams that have some level of continuity, and I'm looking for teams that have a good amount of depth. And in my eyes, the only team out of those 4 that clearly checks off all of those desires is the Dallas Mavericks. I think that there's a clear argument that can be made that Luka could be in the MVP discussion as early as this season. I think he's going to come back hungry. I think the additions and trades that they made in this offseason, acquiring Josh Richardson for Seth Curry, and in the meantime bringing back a younger Seth Curry light and Tyrell Terry in the 2nd round from the draft, also getting a nice 3-and-D wing who's a little iffy on the 3 for now, but the D will be there from the start. And Josh Green, I like their 2nd-round pick, and Tyler Bay. They brought back some depth in the front court. Willie Cauley-Stein, he's not anything to sneeze at, but he's a good backup caliber, top 30 center in the league. And
top 30 center?
Top 30, top 35. I don't know.
Center? How deep did it go?
There's not many centers, Mike. There's not many centers.
Yeah.
And they have James Johnson, Bloodsport, Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleber. I just think their rotation makes so much sense. We saw them be the most efficient offense of all time last season. I think up is the only way for them to go, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were the 2 seed. But I have them at 3 right now. What do you guys think?
I differ with you. I think Dallas is overrated, and I've got them at 6, and I think I'm probably giving them the benefit of the doubt to put them at 6. I don't think they've improved their team. And to date, I don't think we've seen Luka and Porzingis surface as a legitimate 1-2 superstar on the two of them together. Luka's everything you say he is. He's everything I see he is. The other thing that worries me on that team is I don't think that I love Rick Kylo. I think he's a great coach. I don't think his coaching style matches the team's playing style. I think Luka is I don't think Rick Carlisle is best in a running game in an open floor game. I think he's better in a restricted game like when he had Dirk and played a lot more half court. And Luka is certainly looking to play wide open. I think I would rather see Luka with Zion at New Orleans than to see Luka with Porzingis. I think Porzingis has taken a step back since the injury. I don't see him as a power player. And when I first saw him, I was saying he was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in terms of what he could do in a low post and what he could do with his sky hook. I haven't seen much from him close to the basket, or as much as I would expect to see from him close to the basket. He hasn't got back to where he was, even with the Knicks. I think he probably never got to where he needed to be with the Knicks. So I got questions on that team. Even though Luka is an MVP candidate, absolutely, he's incredible. He's a great player. I don't think they improved that team with Josh Richardson and the draft choices. I think they treaded water, and Seth Curry was very valuable to them. And I think Seth Curry would be more valuable to Philadelphia and was more valuable to Dallas than Josh Richardson would be, myself.
Biddies, where are you on the Mavs?
Mavs, I have more in that 7 to 10 play-in range. I think in a season where you have the condensed schedule, you have guys being grabbed out of games for COVID, you have games getting moved around. I think it's really hard on a team like Dallas where everything is on the shoulders of one guy, and the drop down to the next best player in Porzingis and the rest of the supporting cast. I don't think it's as good as, say, when Portland gets to have CJ McCollum running the show in Dame's absence, or when Dame isn't having as good of a night, or say Phoenix when you have Booker and Chris Paul making those role players a lot better. I think Luka has so much on his shoulders, and I think last year was almost the best case scenario for them. And I think that this year they're going to take a step back because they are not as well built for a weird COVID schedule.
I understand your.
But I would think, Shay, that me and Biddies are in the minority here, from what I can see.
Well, I think common perception is kind of in the middle where we are. I think most people consider them a 5 or a 6 seed, probably closer to where Mike is on them than where I am or where Biddies is. But I understand Luka had top 5 usage in the league last year, but if you continue to look a little bit deeper, I mean, their bench units were incredibly efficient and well run when Luka was on the bench. Carlisle, I disagree with you completely, thinking that Carlisle can't maximize these players that he has here. He proved that he could with this style that he has last year, and now he has pieces that fit just as good, if not better.
I think he does a great job. I just think there's a better style for that team.
I think that the amount of minutes that they employ interesting and intriguing and unorthodox lineups, like 3 guards and 2 bigs that are both role men. All their bigs can stretch the floor. I really like Maxi Kleber, Dwight Powell. These guys are depth that other teams don't have in the front court. I think this is one of the deepest teams in the entire Western Conference. I mean, Jalen Brunson, Trey Burke, JJ Barea, Josh Green, Courtney Lee, Tim Hardaway Jr., Josh Richardson, Dorian Finney-Smith. I mean, those are a lot of iffy names, but when you compile them all together, that's way deeper than any other team to win.
Powell does a great job with that group. Does a great job.
When I'm comparing that to, okay, Denver is going to need to continue to see development out of Monte Morris and PJ Dozier, and they're going to need to depend on JaMychal Green and Isaiah Hartenstein to play minutes for them in the reserves, or the Warriors have to depend on Jordan Poole and Kent Bazemore to be their only swing depth on their bench. and other teams like the Rockets or you were saying the Blazers. I mean, they have new pieces in, but I think that those teams could consolidate. But I see less questions with the Mavs. I know how they're going to play. I think it's more likely than not that we see an incredible offensive season from this team, and that Luka could easily come out, average something like Russell Westbrook MVP statistic level stuff, and just blow us all away. To bleed into some other teams, I would like to button up the Western Conference with discussing one other team between the Warriors and the Blazers, and then discussing the end of the conference in terms of what would be likely happening in the play-in and who we hope could get it in.
We'll have Golden State, Shay.
Okay, go ahead for Golden State.
Where do you have them?
I have them as my number 4 team.
I can't see that.
Where do you have them?
6.
I have them out of the playoffs.
Out of the playoffs. I love it. All right. Well,
I just don't think there's enough room. I think in the West particularly, and I worry about that because I think them and New Orleans are both good teams that could certainly surface, but I don't think Golden State. Klay Thompson was a death blow to them, and to depend on Wiseman stepping forward and Kelly Oubre stepping forward, and say that Steph Curry is the best player in basketball, and that well, I'm saying anybody that's got him at number 4 is going to be saying he's that good because he's the one that's going to be that team. And as much as I love Steph Curry, I'm not sure he can carry that team that he's got even into the playoffs. I think they may fall short. And Wiseman, I think Wiseman's going to need time. I think Wiseman has got he's young. I don't think he's ready for the NBA game mentally, and we'll see. Maybe he'll be real good defensively right away, right off the bat, and he'll be a star. That's possible, but I'm thinking he's going to need time, and I think beyond that, my guy who I've always had a battle with you with, and I'm not really my guy. I just think he's had a great career. I think Draymond's on the downside. I'll be very surprised if he returns to an elite defender, top 3 defender in the league, constant triple-double. I think we've seen his best days, and if that's going to be your second best player, you tell me. Are they going to be able? Are they better than the Lakers, the Clippers, Utah, Dallas, Denver, Houston, Phoenix, Portland? I don't think so. I think there's 8 teams that are better than them.
So, Biddies, when we talked earlier in the off season, you had the Warriors as, I forget whether it was just a contender or your favorite to win the championship. How has the loss of Klay Thompson changed your perspective on this team?
Yeah, I definitely had them as the favorite. I liked what the potential of them having a year off going into the wacky season.
That was before Oubre too.
Yes.
That was before Oubre, yeah.
Yes. I like that as an advantage going into this year. And then to lose Klay Thompson, who means so much to them, that made me bump them down to 6. And really the reason why I didn't slide them even more is, unlike Mike, I am going to give Steph Curry the benefit of the doubt. I don't think he's the best player in the world, but I think he's one of the best players in the world. He makes his teammates better. Having his shooting ability on the floor is a good offense in a package, no matter who you're putting around him. And I think that they have just such strong organizational continuity, like you were talking about earlier. I think that is going to carry them into not having a terrible season, just because I can't picture this winning organization to endure a second painful year in a row.
The last time we saw them at an elite level, they had Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson. That's a big drop.
Yeah, big drop from the greatest team of all time. What are you talking about? Who the heck cares about that?
Who cares whether they drop from the greatest team of all time? They lose 2 of the two of the three best players on the greatest team of all time, and they become, and in that competitive Western Conference, you tell me which one of those 8 teams that they are significantly better than. Are they better than Portland? I don't think they're better than Portland.
Well, I think they're in the same tier as the Blazers, Nuggets, and Mavs. You can get all the way the heck out of here with whether or not they're better than the Utah Jazz. I don't know if the Jazz are going to be in a top 10 seed, but with the Golden
Utah.
With the Golden State Warriors, I think that Steph is probably going to average 32 a game. He'll be an MVP candidate. This team is going to have a top 10 defense. They're going to play crazy fast. They're going to get shots up. Oubre and Wiggins are going to be able to alleviate some pressure from the aging shoulders of Draymond Green in very similar roles that Draymond had back in his prime. I think the three-headed monster. No, I don't think so at all. Three-headed monster there.
I think he needs to. He can't. For him to be the number 2 option on that team, he's going to fall into the same trap he did at Minnesota, and he's not prepared to carry that. He's not prepared to be the 2 option on that.
I don't think you need to consider him the number 2 option. I think it's like Steph, and then it's Warriors offense. That's the option. It's Steph and Warriors offense.
So because they don't have a number 2 option, that's why you can't consider them. They don't have one.
Right, that's fine. I don't want Wiggins to be implored as the number 2.
Every other team in the league has got a number 2 option, and that is all NBA caliber.
I don't know about that, but I just think that Wiggins and Oubre are both going to average 17 to 20 points a game. I think they're both going to play great defense. What?
Oubre's good, but he's not an all-star.
That's fine. They don't need to be a second all-star.
He could, but he hasn't proven anything yet.
I think the balance that you're going to get from their lineup, and you can talk about depth as one of their concerns, and that's one of my issues that I have with them for sure. But I just think what you're going to get in terms of a recipe from Kerr and from Myers, I think they're going to make smart additions. Hopefully they can bring in another shooter. I love Wanamaker for them. I mean, Bazemore is a good role matcher with Oubre and Wiggins, same archetype. I think Wiseman, I don't think he's going to have much pressure to do much.
So you love Wanamaker for them, but you hated him for the Celtics.
I definitely. Now that he's off the team, I respect him.
How does that work?
Yeah,
he couldn't back up Kemba, but he can back up Steph.
Yeah, he can definitely do that. Well, it's a bigger variance there. It's a big upgrade when their backup point guard before was Nico Mannion coming into not having Brad Wanamaker, where on our case we had much more options. What team on the bottom of the conference are you most excited about, while at the same time nervous that they might not get a spot in the playoffs? So my 7 through 11 is Houston, Phoenix, New Orleans, Utah, and Memphis. I understand that you're both probably going to have Utah a lot higher, but which of those teams to close out the Western Conference are you most excited to watch this year?
Well, I think outside the top 8, for me, it would be Golden State and New Orleans. New Orleans, Steven Adams is going to mean a lot to that team, I think, and he's an upgrade from where they were. I like freeing Lonzo Ball in terms of even though Drew Holiday was good, I don't think they're going to miss much there. I know defensively they've got issues. Hey, tell me this. I mean, as I'm thinking about it, I'm putting chumps out there and everything. Is Zion only going to be in shape when he's not playing and always be out of shape when he is playing? Is that how it works with him?
He looks great. He looks great.
He's a monster and he's ready to go. Yet when he shows up, he's the Pillsbury Doughboy.
He looks skinny.
I wonder.
Again, that he's ready, because if he is, wow. And they got with Ingram and they got a fun team. I really want to watch that team. I love Steven Adams, and I think they can put a nice 5 on the floor.
Biddies, are the Pelicans in the playoffs?
No, they're not.
They're not in the playoffs. I got them outside the playoffs. You said my favorite team's outside the playoffs.
Drew Holiday really did do so much for that team. Not that Steven Adams isn't a great addition.
But Drew Holiday had already taken a diminished role on that team over the last 2 years. And I know he played well last year, but especially the year before, he's taken a diminished role there. I don't think they're going to miss him as good as he is. I don't think they're going to miss him as much as Milwaukee's going to like him.
Yeah, I do think he means more to a good team than to a team that's
the defense.
Mediocre. Excellent defender. I would say, most intriguing towards the bottom would have to be Houston, because this is a team that 2 seasons ago pushed that greatest team of all time, Warriors, to a 7th game in the conference finals. And this year, they have talent on the roster as it stands right now. So could they go back to the conference finals? Probably not. But if Harden has a great playoff run that he has not had yet, then I could see them surprising us and making that push. And then there's also another outcome where, a lot of Christmas lists next year have a Cade Cunningham jersey on the top down in Houston. So I just think that their variance is so extreme
Yes.
that they'll be interesting to watch.
And then you get all the turmoil of Harden wanting out. But there were times last year when Westbrook and Harden actually played well on the court. And you had the injury situation in the bubble that changed things for Westbrook considerably. But I'm not so sure that they can't play together. I haven't accepted that yet. It'll be interesting to see how Christian Wood plays compared to how Capella was used and how he played inside that system. If he can be a player, that team's dangerous. You can't, and the coaching change may be positive for them. Something about Harden wanting out is not good.
I don't know. There's too many questions there. I think if I had to section out a pie in terms of what the most likely scenarios are, I think they're in the lottery more often than not. It's just that their ceiling with those two players that are currently on the roster, you have to put them in the playoffs almost, even though all your better judgment is telling you that this is probably going to be a team that looks a lot different very soon and is going to be bad for a little bit. It's hard to wrap your head around completely, but I wouldn't be surprised if Harden got moved and Westbrook was less desired. We've seen the sputtering market on him. I mean, unless it's John Wall or Blake Griffin, I don't think Westbrook is going to have a new home anytime soon. And then the rest of their lineup, sans newly acquired Christian Wood, is all over the place. I mean, we have bubble flunk out Daniel House. We have unhappy PJ Tucker. I mean, Bruno Caboclo is their backup wing in terms
Ariza,
of bigs.
DeMarcus Cousins.
Boogie, yeah. I mean, their backup point guard is that guy that's like 5'6", Clemens. There's too many things that are just blatant red flags on this roster with his new coach in a competitive Western Conference. They don't have things like
remember how excited we were about
a good system
a little time a while ago, and how
oh
much
my gosh, it's going to be different.
That was great.
But I don't.
Hey, what I'm thinking about it with the Clippers. Why is everybody so excited about Marc Gasol? No, I mean the Lakers. I'm sorry, the Lakers. I'm sorry.
I just think that he's going to be a steadying presence.
But you didn't like him with Toronto at all.
No, I thought he was.
You were talking about how he should have on the floor more than 5 minutes.
I was excited every time he came in the game for Serge Ibaka because Ibaka was killing us, and Marc Gasol missed every 3-pointer he took. I think, when we're talking about a Dwight Howard replacement, you don't need to be a world beater. But I think for the Lakers, it's really about replacing Rondo with Dennis Schroeder, adding Trez, who I didn't even know that was a possibility. They could go out and get him.
Yeah, true.
So I think Marc Gasol was kind of just like, they didn't even downgrade from the Dwight Howard spot, and they're coming back even better from the championship. Yeah,
well, Howard gave him a lot of energy, and he didn't have to play a lot of minutes, and if they're going to be starting Gasol, he's not the defensive player of the year anymore. I mean, what he did in Toronto was blatant in terms of, Shea saw it, we all saw it. I think our eyes were on him more than maybe other people's eyes were on him. In Toronto, he just didn't have it.
I think that
locker room guy and everything, but anyway.
Gasol is going to struggle in a playoff series where the other team has potent perimeter creators and shooters. Anything that's heavy pick and roll or that requires the big to move a little bit more. I mean, the Lakers will probably play drop with him, and he's still one of the higher IQ defenders in the league, and he's really good in the low post, which will do good defending players like Nikola Jokic, who is likely going to be a competitor in the playoffs. But I just think his role is going to be small. He's probably there more for pedigree and for experience and for mentorship. I think that he probably because of the way he carries himself and because of his high IQ, he'll be one of the few players on the roster that can, in practice, check LeBron if LeBron is not taking responsibility for something he should be, or what have you. I think that he's going to be a valued addition, even if on the floor it doesn't change that much
Some
in
of it
terms of
depends
actual.
on how much Anthony Davis is agreeable to playing a lot at the five, and
Yes.
That's not something that he is said he likes to do. Maybe with a world championship now, he'll play more minutes at the five, because if he prefers the four and that's where he wants to play and that's where he's going to play, it opens a lot of minutes there in the middle for Gasol to play. 20.
I like it. I mean, it's pretty funny, the variance of perspective that has been spouted out about Montrezl Harrell. I mean, I thought he was pretty universally accepted as a freak, energetic bench guy who can score and rebound in bunches, but isn't a phenomenal defender. But all of a sudden, he's either the worst thing ever or the best thing since sliced bread for this Lakers team. It's really weird. I think he's pretty in the middle. I think it was a good acquisition. I think that was pretty similar money than he was going to get elsewhere. It's not like they got him for a steal. I think he's going to be valuable off the bench. And in times where they had to depend on Kyle Kuzma to be their scorer when LeBron and Anthony Davis were off the floor and the ball kind of skidded to a stop and it was kind of a nightmare to watch, I think Montrez could really alleviate a lot of that secondary scoring that team doesn't have.
Yeah, I was just interrupted by your Aunt Willa Rand for about a minute. I didn't talk to her. She just was ringing it and it took your voice away, so I didn't hear what you said the last 2 minutes. One of our traditions, it just went, all I could hear was the phone ringing. But one of our traditions, Thanksgiving-wise, is it was always at my sister's Willa Rand, your aunt, and we did the 4-day thing there. So she's continuing a number of traditions, and one of them is she always made a big vat of turkey soup that we all come over with a pan on Saturdays and fill our pot with turkey soup. And she's just calling me right now to let me know that the turkey soup is ready, I think. So
nice.
Anyways, I didn't hear what you just said. It was probably Lakers talking.
Yeah, it's not that important. We can shift over to the Eastern Conference.
Yeah,
I like how varied our opinions are on the West. I think it'll be really interesting to shake out. As far as the Eastern Conference go, I think it's just looking at the whole conference as a whole. I think it's a lot less difficult to delineate. So let's see how.
About it again. Excuse the interruption. Have they changed the schedule? Are they playing more games inside the East and not many with the West? Is that how this is going to go, or are they still traveling and are they still playing every team twice, or has that changed?
So they dropped the number of games, and I think the games that were dropped were probably the extra games played against far opponents with what flexibility they have. I mean, the schedule's pretty complex. And then,
but there will be interconference play.
Yeah, but they're just going to pair together trips. So it's kind of like you're going to play the entire western coast of California together. You'll play the entire Atlantic Division sans the Raptors because they're going to be down in Florida all at the same time. It's kind of, they're going to be as smart as they can about minimizing travel and minimizing exposure to different people as much as they can. But it should be interesting. And yeah, essentially they're playing 90% of the same schedule that they would be normally.
Okay. Thanks.
So to move to the Eastern Conference, I have maybe 2 tiers, and I don't know where they break, but you can see I'll just run through 1 through 8. My 1 through 8 is the Bucks, the Sixers, the Celtics, the Heat, the Nets, the Raptors, the Pacers, and the Hawks. And I can see if you think that John Wall and Bradley Beal are going to coalesce and everything's going to be jolly there, how they would be the 8 seed instead of the Hawks. Or if you think that the Hornets or the Magic are going to make waves in the play-in tournament, maybe they're in there too, but those would be the only other teams that I would give any credit or hope of making the playoffs. I think it's likely that everyone who's considering the teams to make the playoffs is probably going to have those same 7 teams at the top. How you order them is going to be how you consider what improvements or shortcomings they had in this offseason. I think when it comes to the Milwaukee Bucks, I do think that they've improved in the short term. It's concerning the flub that they had with Bogdanovich. I don't think that changes a ton for them in terms of where they were last year.
I think it does.
I still think they're improved with the addition of Drew Holiday. I think DiVincenzo can increase his role offensively. I don't think he's obviously not anywhere near the same shot maker as Bogdanovich was.
The
but
question on that team is whether they satisfy Giannis or not. And
well, yeah, that's
the underlying thing on that team. No matter what is on December 21st, we're going to know whether he's staying or leaving, and that's a biggie. And he really wanted Bogdanovich. And,
no, badly, yeah.
So not getting Bogdanovich, I think, is a problem on that team. And I was all excited when they had Bogdanovich and Drew Holiday. I'm nowhere near as excited without Bogdanovich. And what I would say about Bogdanovich is what I'm saying, talking about is, man, I don't know whether this is a chump. It's probably not. But the freaking NBA and their cap, I feel like I'm watching Game of Thrones. It's like the 7 counties of the 7 families. Who's from this spot? Try following this thing if you're a casual fan and following all these things and what happened with Bogdanovich or why he was in and was out, or the cap rules and the stretch and then pushing the stretch over a couple of years and feeding it back, and how much money is the Celtics. That whole thing is just so complicated that I don't know whether they can change that at all or whether it's just, with Game of Thrones, I took advice from my brother-in-law and said, just watch it. Just watch it. Don't worry about the 7 kingdoms of Westeros and the 6 families and all of this. And I asked my wife Denise the same thing. I said, well, what do you think about Hayward? She said, I got no idea. Tell me what happened when it's over. As a casual fan. It's really difficult, even for someone as plugged into the game as I am. And I'm not like you are as a capologist, to keep track of this and to try to decipher this cap luxury tax mix of things. It's really, really complex.
I don't know if the Bogdanovich mishap was necessarily cap related, more to
rules about who could know what when.
Right, exactly. That's it.
Whether he knew about the trade before, those kind of rules. You didn't even consider. I assumed that he was traded and that everything was on the up and up. But then you say, oh no, he was not in a position contract-wise with his agent, whatever, his free agent. It hadn't happened yet. They can't be talking about him being traded because it was too early and they needed to wait. So he really wasn't traded. But we absolutely were sure he was traded, right? That was written in stone.
I would say he
didn't even know.
I would say the deal was agreed. I would say he knew. And I would say either one of two things happened. Either the league said, this is way too early. You can't do this. Stall off and complete it later, or you can't do it at all. Or the agent, after this stuff was leaked, got some phone calls from some teams saying, I can give you $8 million more than you just got.
Bogdanovich knew. How could the Bucks not know how Bogdanovich felt? How could they not know that?
What do you mean?
Bogdanovich? Because he wasn't coming. He wasn't going to be part of that trade.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I think initially Bogdanovich wanted to play.
He wasn't
for
in the
Bucks.
country.
I think he was interested in joining Giannis. I think Giannis and him have a relationship that's mutual. Yes. It's not just a one-side admiration from Giannis. I think that Bogdanovich was interested in playing for a championship team, making a lot of money. I just told you, either the league said, no, this is tampering, you can't do this, or his agent found out that he could get $10 million more from the Atlanta Hawks. It's just one of those two things. And Bogdanovich said, okay, I don't want the headache. I don't want the fines. They're going to come down. I'm probably going to get fined. Bogdan's going to get fined. The Milwaukee Bucks are going to get fined, and the Sacramento Kings are going to get fined. They didn't want to deal with all that headache. So instead, they just fabricated the story.
Why wouldn't we have found that out before the fact? Why wouldn't we have known that Bogdanovich had to be tampered with because he wasn't available yet? And they can't be talking about him actually being traded because they weren't allowed to do that. We didn't even talk about that.
Someone slipped up, whether it was maybe it was Giannis and his party. Maybe it was probably someone from the Sacramento Kings. I mean, it's hard once you are listing out the possibilities and the things that need to go right for it to happen and the restrictions and the walls that exist between. But when I think the right point of view and perspective is to just think of it kind of like Denise does, and at this point, where saying, what team is he on? He's on the Atlanta Hawks. How much money is he making? Oh, he's not on the Bucks. That's it. and I think that's kind of where it moves. It was a fumble, whether it was their fault, whether it was Lazary and the Bucks' fault, whether it was Giannis' fault, Bogdan, whoever's to blame, it doesn't matter. It's in the past. I do think that it probably didn't go over well with Giannis, that it wasn't smooth and it wasn't a fluid process and a completed deal that landed him his friend. And an awesome fit, have you? We've talked about how Bogdanovich would have been great there. So I do think it's interesting to pay attention to moving forward if he signs this extension or not. I wouldn't be surprised if this was a ripple in the pond that led astray for his long-term future there. At the end of the day, I think he's staying. I think he's staying. Everything you hear is that he's looking for reasons to stay. He's saying, give me.
At number one after what happened with Bogdanovich. I don't think they're number
one.
No
way. How are they not better than they were last year in terms of personnel? Because they were the best team in the league last year. What are you talking about?
I talk style of play, and I think their style of play is flawed, especially in the playoffs. It's flawed.
Not in the regular season, it's not.
Yeah. The half-court offense with Giannis is flawed. It's not a good half-court offense. When you put Bogdanovich out there with Jrue Holiday, it changed the half-court offense, and it became viable. I'm not willing to make that team the number one team in the East when I see that they're flawed in the playoffs, unless they can fix that. I don't see what they got that can fix it.
Well, I think regular season-wise that they really should be the number one seed again. Giannis could very well win another MVP, and I think Holiday is an upgrade. It gives them something that they're pretty shallow in terms of a guy who can both shoot the ball or put the ball on the floor and take it to the rim. And I think there's really no reason that they shouldn't come back out, be the same team that led the league in wins last year and get the number one seed in the East again. And then playoffs is a huge TBD because when the game kind of tightens up, gets more physical, gets more half court in the playoffs, we saw Miami really easily handle Milwaukee. So I think regular season wise, Milwaukee has to be number one, and they are very deserving of a ton of postseason.
Yeah, well, when I'm rating the teams as who's the best team in the East. That's how I'm rating them. I'm not picking where they're going to pick. I'm picking who's the best team, and I don't see Milwaukee as the best team.
I think that's okay. I do think it's very, very likely that they're going to have the most wins. They're going to feast on the weaker competition.
I think there's more teams that can beat them this year, and there's more teams that understand.
Right. So let's move forward because I do agree with you. And my 2 through 4 seeds are teams that I think I would pick over the Bucks in a playoff series. And my 2 through 4 seeds are Sixers, Celtics, Heat. We saw how the Heat handled them last season. They've brought back essentially the same team. They're going to have internal development from their young players and from continued progression of this system. They drafted Precious Achiuwa, who I love. I think Bam and Hero are going to continue to develop into future all-star players. So I'm really excited about them. The Sixers, I've spoken on how excited I am for this team finally to make sense. Shifting Tobias Harris likely down to a permanent power forward, and they're going to slot in Seth Curry and Danny Green into heavy minutes at the 2 and the 3. I think the offense circulating around Ben Simmons and at times Joel Embiid, obviously with the defense being more focused on just having Embiid as the anchor, is going to be miraculous. I like both of those teams a lot. I think that one improved a lot from a team last year that was tumultuous and problematic, and the other team is staying strong from a finals appearance last year. Obviously, we have the Celtics. So which of those 3 teams do you think is most formidable towards taking down me and Biddy's number 1 seed in the Milwaukee Bucks?
Yeah, I got to go Boston.
Boston, yeah.
No doubt about it. You look at so much of the offseason talk about the Celtics has been centered on Gordon Hayward, which it was a big deal. I get it. But you take Gordon Hayward out of the equation, and you have the team that swept Simmons-less Philadelphia, beat Toronto in 7, and was 2 bad halves away from being up 2-0 against Miami. And then you trade out Cantor for a much better fit in Tristan Thompson, and you trade out Wanamaker for Teague. And then I was kind of given the comparison earlier with Denver. So many other guys in the league are who they are. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown still have a lot of room to grow. And then even on some role players like the Williams brothers, even Marcus Smart, you still can see some room to grow from those guys on the Celtics. So as much as the Hayward drama has dominated the offseason talk around us, I think we're coming back a better team. And ultimately, ever since we drafted him, the fate of the Celtics is going to be determined by whether or not Jason Tatum can be a first-team All-NBA caliber guy, and I think he's capable.
I think the big curveball is I watched the podcast this week. I was excited. I meant to mention it last week, Ron, is I knew that Stevens was coming on with Bob Ryan and Jeff Goodman, and I was when they come because I want to hear them. So I was there. I listened to the whole thing. Is that it's absolutely apparent now that. And I'm not raising a red flag. I don't want to. Is that Kemba is a completely different player than what we thought we had, and that plugging him into this coming season is much different than how we plugged him into last season. If he took all that time off, prepared for the bubble, was still hurt there, and now it's being acknowledged that he's probably not ready to start the season. And again, I'm not raising a red flag. It's just that. They're going to have to play with his minutes. They're going to have to play with his games, back-to-backs and stuff like that. And that's going to be a constant. And yet also add to that even when he does play, he's not the same player as he was before. I think that's a problem on that team because I know Marcus Smart can play the point, but there's other guard minutes there that are going to be played by Teague. And is Pritchard good enough to actually play? They've got some weaknesses with Hayward out, and I think that Hayward was a luxury on that team because of the way that Brown and Tatum surfaced. But you've got Langford, and boy, when I hear Langford talk, and I just heard him talking in this week, he seems like he's about 15 when you hear him talk. I mean, not a lot comes out that is more than somebody that you would expect is in high school in terms of, although he plays a pretty mature game, but and he can't play. I mean, he's out right now. So that means Aaron Naismith's going to, or they're very weak on the wing. So actually they're better at the center position, which is true. I think with Tristan Thompson and Tice and Rob Williams, they're better than they were last year. But I can't put that team as a contender.
I think that. I have issues with, and you spoke on Hayward being a luxury, and how Kemba at the same time, it's so problematic because of the decline that we're experiencing, and I don't think it's going to be enormous, but I do think we're going to have to continue to monitor and deal with and appropriately rest
his own coach
his knee. That's fine.
Not speculation.
At the end of the day, this is too much discussion for the team's fourth best player, whether it's Gordon Hayward or Kemba Walker. I don't think it's going to be as consequential as these discussions would lend you to think.
Might have been our number one player going into the season.
That's not even close to being true because Tatum is like the 13th best player in the league.
When we got Kemba and Tatum and Brown hadn't surfaced to where they ended up on surfing. I think Kemba was the number one player on that team.
Okay, but that's not where we are anymore, Mike.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's where we're dealing with. And instead of he's now, you're right. He's the third, fourth best player on the team, if that.
Right. So I don't think that matters because of the improvement that we've had from the young guys. Tatum is a top 15 player in the league. Jaylen Brown, whether he's top 25, top 30 for you, he's top 20 for me. But it's just
I wrote about the end game.
I think our roster makes more sense. There's more balance. We have that depth in the front court that we didn't have last year. We're going to have more answers. There's less players that I get queasy about when they're going to see minutes, whether it's Wanamaker or whether it's Cantor or what have you. I just think there's more answers than solutions here. And I understand that there are some questions primarily revolving around Kemba and his health. I don't think that Hayward is a big loss. I think the roles are going to increase for both the wings. I think hopefully we're going to see some depth, some growth just in terms of minutes. But they can play 36. I think Grant Williams might be starting at the 4. I think I'm excited for the defense that he can provide.
That's not the best case scenario. Grant Williams starting on that team.
If he's starting, that means a lot of things are going good. I think that means he's developed.
I just think that's a sign of weaknesses that Grant Williams is going to start. I know he's done some
consistency. He's a sign of consistency.
And he's good stylistic fit around.
Yes.
I think he's small.
Yes.
I think he plays bigger than he's like 6'7", 6'7".
That's fine.
I know he plays tough and he plays hard, He did have that 1 for 31 streak, and I know he's hit 3-point shots since then, and it looks like maybe he can hit his 3. But I don't think he's a starter in the NBA. I don't think he would start for any
Mike, why can't he be
start for any team in the NBA.
No, that's wrong. Why can't he be high IQ? Why can't he be high IQ PJ Tucker?
I downgrade a guy. I say how much I like him.
Why can't he be high IQ PJ Tucker? I see no reason that he can't do that. I think he has similar skill set.
Because he's in his second year and he didn't play a lot last year, and he's nowhere near what PJ Tucker is. PJ Tucker is a knockdown corner 3-point shooter, a mad dog pit bull for 40 minutes a game if he had to play on defense, consistently game in and game out. Grant Williams is not that. And again, I like Grant Williams, but I just don't think he's an NBA starter. And I know I heard that too, that you could see him and Tristan Thompson as your 4-5. Wow.
I'd rather just go, if you're going to start Thompson, I'd put Tyson at the 4 instead of Williams. But back to Kemba. In the bubble, Kemba was already the guy who we are concerned about. And the Celtics still played really well, still a few plays away from maybe a trip to the finals. And like I said, the growth that we saw from Jason Tatum last year, particularly after the All-Star break, was incredible. And if we see anything similar to that again, then the rest of the league is really on notice. Shay, me and you had the same top 8 except one trade.
Okay.
I'm Brooklyn at 2 and Philly at 5.
Okay.
You're Brooklyn what?
2.
Oh my God. For one thing, a team I don't like, I have a hard time rating high. But man, don't we have to see them first before we can rate them that high?
Why do you have them 2, Biddies? Why do you have them 2?
They have one of the best players of all time in Kevin Durant, and I'm going to bet on him coming back healthy and arguably being the best player in the Eastern Conference, particularly come playoff time, just his ability to score from anywhere on the floor. And then you have Irving as in the right role as a running mate next to an all-time player, which I think he was a lot more comfortable in Cleveland. And there's so many question marks about those personalities lining up, but I will bet on the talent, especially from Durant, who I think is going to have a big chip on his shoulder. And I see them as having the potential to really take out anyone in being the second best 1-2 punch in the league behind James and Davis.
So where it's interesting with the Nets is if you're framing it in the discussion, which it seems that Mike is in terms of seeding off the 8 teams, I think 2 could make sense. And this team with the top end talent and the wiggle room to make a move with Dinwiddie and LeVert and Jared Allen or what have you, whatever they end up doing, whether it's James Harden or Beal or something, Blake Griffin,
or just riding with depth.
Right. Or just riding with depth. I don't think Dinwiddie is on board for that, but what have you. Maybe they go get Lou Williams or something, This team does have that ceiling because of the talent where they could easily be in the conference finals, and it just needs health from Durant to get there. But I think there's too many questions with personalities, and I think that the regular season, I see too many highs and lows in terms of playing, whether it's to health or just to rest in general, with both of their stars, Kyrie and Kevin Durant. They're both coming off big injuries. I don't think they're going to be coming back playing 34, 35 minutes a game regularly. I don't think they're going to be playing in this truncated season where it's condensed. There's going to be more back-to-backs than there were last year. I think it's more likely than not if there's going to be 72 total games. You've never seen Kyrie play 55, or maybe there was one season in his entire career, and that's out of 82. So only imagine how many games he's going to be playing in a 72-game season. I think it's a safer bet to have him closer to 5 or 6 because of what I think will likely be a season that is hiccup, a lack of continuation, new coaching, new personalities for bench pieces and role players to familiarize themselves with, where I do think it's obvious that they have that ceiling that you said, and that's purely based on talent. I don't think I'm going to have them as a home court team. And maybe because of that and because of my trust in the other team, if we're talking about trust as a factor, there's just so many other teams that I prefer to the Nets. And it seems like Mike might be closer to my end of the spectrum than Biddy's. Mike, what do you think about the Nets?
Yeah. Well, what I think about the Nets is that we just haven't seen it. And so I've got to see how Kyrie and Durant play together. We've never seen Kyrie. The only coach he ever played for was LeBron. And that's a fact. He's never played for any other coach. And for him to come in and both of them saying that this team really doesn't need a coach, which they did say, and I'm not tossing that away. I think of the fact that he said, me and Kevin, we don't need a coach. We know how to play. That means it's going to be Kyrie ball that we're seeing out there. And that, and as much as I like Nash, and I think they've got a good coaching staff there, Kyrie is a handful, and he's going to want to play his style. The other thing that worries me is I don't think that Kevin Durant is a real good coaching prospect in that league. I think he made a big mistake wanting James Harden. And if he wanted James Harden on that team, what does that say to Kyrie? How is Kyrie going to play with James Harden? It may have been Durant actually taking Harden. I'm sure it wasn't Kyrie that was saying, let's get Harden on this team.
Not a chance.
I love Dinwiddie. I love LeVert. I love Joe Harris. I think you got to question, why do they have LeVert and Dinwiddie? Why don't they go get something else? Maybe improve Allen's position a little bit. But I got so many times I've seen teams that on paper have it all that don't do it. So I've got to see this team before I'm going to concede that based on the talent that they're a championship contender.
Yeah,
I got them at like number 6.
I'm first and foremost just betting on Kevin Durant's track record, and even going back to those Oklahoma City days in a really great Western Conference. That team was always at the top of the standings, but they do have so many variables between really physical and mental health on that team that could derail their season. So I understand the doubt, but they do have the talent.
So for the final seed in the conference, I have the Hawks. It sounds like Biddies has the Hawks, yes? Do you have the Hawks too, Mike?
Yes, I do.
How boring.
You're only picking the Hawks over Charlotte and Orlando and Washington. So, but
Right.
the Hawks they've got some potential there. I wonder how Rondo fits on that team. It was so obvious how he fit on the Lakers because LeBron was playing the point, but it was easy to see how LeBron at times would be it would be best for him to be off the ball and for Rondo to be on the ball. I can't see Trae Young being off the ball. And Trae Young is going to play a lot of minutes. He already plays a lot of minutes. I don't know where Rondo as a mentor, he's a pretty good mentor on a team like the Lakers. He's not a very good mentor on a team like the Celtics or the Dallas and the other teams. I don't really see him as a real strong mentor on that team. And I don't see I think he may get frustrated with his lack of playing time on that team because Trae Young's not taking a step back.
I think that initially I had similar trepidation to you about Rondo and his role and about what he was going to mean for this team as a diminished player that was going to need to see rotation minutes. But then they signed Chris Dunn, and really a lot of these issues were alleviated. And now I think he's going to be a 10-minute a game player, if that. I don't think he's playing a lot. I think he came on board as purely a bench coach, a mentor player that can stymie minutes on the court as a general when needed. But at the end of the day, I think that they want him to be a player who can be at his highest and most valuable come this play-in tournament that they're probably going to be playing in, and eventually a first round matchup versus either the Bucks or the Celtics, Sixers, Heat, what have you, and that's where he's going to be valued.
And again, maybe there's an answer for this that I don't know, is that Rondo actually resurfaced this year, obviously, and got a ring and was the number 3 guy in that team in the bubble and really got a lot of credibility back in his game. what happened that he still didn't have that in LA? I don't see that they had to go get Schroeder. Why did they go get Schroeder? Why wasn't Rondo? Is he too old?
What?
Schroeder's
So
That's a
much better
big
than Rondo.
upgrade. That's a
Huge
big
I know
upgrade.
Schroeder's I like Schroeder. I think he's great, but they had that was a nice situation. So what they did is they gave up on Rondo. Is that what happened? You were saying?
I think you can get a player like Schroeder with the 28th pick in the draft, especially when you're playing for win now. That's just a no-brainer. Can't turn it down.
And Rondo is a key ingredient for LeBron. I hope that Schroeder can be that. That blend of Rondo and LeBron was really good, and we already talked many times about his blends with Anthony Davis. I'm not so sure that. Schroeder's a scorer off the bench, and nice player, real good player. But I'm surprised that they unless Rondo, they just don't think he's got enough left. I guess so, and I don't think Rondo would have ever accepted to play 10 minutes a game in Atlanta and be a bench coach if he could have had his role back on the Lakers.
Yeah, I think Rondo, he's a late in his career veteran. I don't think that he gives anything to them in a huge way in terms of talent. But
you say late in his career, Biddies, and I agree that but when you look at that body and you look at the effort he was able to give, even on defense, when he hadn't played defense in a while, it looks like he's got at least one more prime year to me. In terms of, I don't think there's any problems there.
Prime is a crazy statement. He hasn't been in his prime. Prime
ended in Boston.
Years. Yeah, I think that your illusion in maybe short-term memory of what he was in the playoffs is blurring what he was for the other 75 to 80% of his stint with the Lakers. He was bad until. Never mind the first round. He was bad until the conference finals. And when you only have such a small sample size,
he didn't have the same role.
I just don't.
It makes
sense. It makes sense for the Lakers to move on, and I think it makes sense for the Hawks to bring him in a limited role. But I think that it's good news that this team took steps forward with Gallinari, and they're the team that landed Bogdanovich. I like Onyeka Okongwu as the future starting big behind Capella until they can find maybe a landing space for Capella. Because of that freedom that they may have just in terms of flexibility with their roster, I could see this team making an upgrade. They have young pieces that they don't have a lot of time for in their rotation, whether it's Reddish or Hunter or Herder. And obviously with these two new acquisitions in Gallinari and Bogdanovich, I wouldn't be surprised if any combination of some of those guys was combined with Capella come year's trade deadline for an upgrade on the swing to fit alongside Trae Young. And that could be a really alluring package for a team like the Washington Wizards if Bradley Beal should become available. I think this team's exciting and has some ceiling that a team like the Pacers and the Raptors, which are around them in the Eastern Conference pecking order, may not have. So I wouldn't be surprised if, right now I have the Hawks as my 8 if they were the 6.
Maybe this would be good for the Celtics is that as plugged as I am into Virginia, where I know their players and their personnel very well, I think DeAndre Hunter is in not in the best situation for him there. With Gallinari coming in, he's not timid, but he's definitely shies away from asserting himself in terms of. I would love to see him available and come to the Celtics or something like that. I mean, they still got Cam, right? Reddish.
Yes, Reddish is still there. Yeah.
I think Hunter may have a hard time fitting in with that team. He needs to be handled in a particular way, and I'm not sure he's going to get that there. He needs to have his confidence built up all the time, and he played well at times last year, but he also had times that he didn't play well. I like it, man.
Touching on Virginia, I'm sure you'll have some remarks for the end of the college discussion about what their outlook is this season. To clarify a point that I didn't realize last year, Diakite is with the Bucks, Mike.
What?
Diakite, he's on the Bucks.
Oh, I know. I think that's a good one, and I think I really believe in the Virginia players, and I think Diakite may surface. I got to keep my eye on Kyle Guy and Ty Jerome. Yep. I think they've got one. I think they've got one right now. They're
moving around.
top 10 pick. He's a lottery pick. He may be the best player that Virginia's had. And don't judge on the last game that he played.
I'm
Sam
judging
Hauser,
on that.
Sam Hauser can play.
He could be a riser. I haven't watched a ton on him, but to bleed it over to the discussion of prospects in this promising draft class for the 2021 college season, to really encapsulate how strong this draft is, particularly at the top, I'm at 8 players now that if you put this draft pool into this Wiseman, Ball, Edwards 2020 draft, that would be my number 1 overall pick. 8 guys that in this draft I think are better than any player that were in the last draft. And to double down on that, on top of those other 7 guys, Cade Cunningham is in his own tier. So that's how good I think Cade Cunningham is. I have him in tier 1 above these other 8 players that are all deserving of a number 1 selection in this draft. That's how good I think Cade Cunningham of Oklahoma State is. He's 6'7", already has NBA body, 220, got a 7, maybe a 7'1" wingspan. His preternatural feel, IQ, and just overall game play is what really makes you can't take your eyes off him when you're watching him. My comparison is some Frankenstein of Ben Simmons and Chris Paul, and what I see with him is
he doesn't have the handle that Chris Paul has.
He does at this level. Chris Paul is one of the best ball handlers of all time, but in terms of where he was at high school, where Chris Paul was at high school, Cade Cunningham has a similar caliber.
I'm wondering where you see the similarity between Cunningham and I don't really see that yet.
IQ, shot creation, the way he attacks the hoop. I just think that
I don't think he runs a team the way that. And again, you said Chris Paul. I think he does run a team well, but I don't. Chris Paul, like you said, Chris Paul's an elite. One of the best ball handlers and one of the best facilitators and runners of a team that there are.
General. He's a general. The communication that I see from Cade and his teammates on both ends of the floor is another thing among many that remind me of Chris Paul. But I just think he measures his play in a manner and a maturity that no other prospect at this age I've ever seen. He has that mental tick to know when to push what percentage, to know when to be where, to predict what is happening and be in a location on the court before anyone else on the court knows what's happening. And he's making it look easy, but it is incredibly complex what he does.
Isn't he more like Luka?
I don't see the shot creation there. There are similarities in terms of his kicks to corner passer, or the way that he can snake a pick and roll, and the way that he can space defenders depending on how he's warping the floor. But the only knack in his game right now, everything is literally like an A+, is shooting, and he's a A- athlete, not an A+ athlete. But at times, I think that, and then all of a sudden, he's putting down East Bay between the legs dunks in a game. So maybe he's just reserving that, and he's a high IQ guy that's not jumping out of the gym, even though he can. And everything that we've heard in this offseason leading up to Oklahoma State, they play today. I think they play tonight in a couple hours. I believe so. And they played their first game against like UTEP or Arlington or Texas Arlington or something like that. They've been stressing in his camp about how big of an improvement he's made in his shot. And his form looks a lot more fluid. The energy transfer isn't as weird as it was, whether he was with USA Basketball or on Mountain Verde Academy. And it shone good in this first game. He made his first 2 threes. I think he missed the one in the second half. But he has confidence in the shot, and I have confidence in his ability to develop into a dependable shooter. So when I'm looking at the grand scheme of what Cade Cunningham is, I see the only way he fails is if he goes to a horrible situation with no way that he can carry this team to a playoff berth. And even then, he's going to make that team that otherwise have no hope at all have a viable future purely because his name is attached to it. I love him. I think watching him is fantastic. He's probably he's my favorite prospect in the last 5 years, at least, and it could be farther than that. I think Cade Cunningham is a clear gem, and I'm really excited to watch him develop over the course of this college season and to see where he lands when he gets to the league, because he's assuredly going to be the number 1 pick in this draft.
And you're giving them a lot defensively to
Yes.
say Simmons and Paul.
Yes, definitely. I think that his ability, I think he can guard 1 through 4 right now. And I think that his IQ, his hand-eye coordination, his quickness, and his footwork are all fantastic on that level. And when we've seen, I hate to say struggle because it's not struggle, but when we've seen him have
Room for improvement.
Maybe it's tracking off ball. He doesn't slither through screens and guys that are on treadmills in the weak side. So maybe guarding 2s out of 1, 2, 3, 4 is his weakest point right now. But I think he has upside to do that as well, just in terms of the IQ that he has and his desire to improve his game. I mean, what we've seen, this growth trajectory for him in terms of, he was a wing with awesome size when he was a freshman in high school. He was like 6'4", 6'5", had some good weight and good shoulders, and he was aggressive and he was an athlete. So he was like a thrasher that was a defensive Swiss Army knife. And then his sophomore year, he developed more as a creator, and he was still kind of a 3 overall, played some 4 just because he's bigger than people at the high school level. But then he went to USA basketball, and all of a sudden he's this lead ball handler, creator. He's the best passer on the floor, and it's not close. And he's doing like Nikola Jokic level IQ mind games with these foreign prospects, and he's making them look ridiculous. He has the weird herky-jerky stutter game where if he picks up his dribble, somehow he's still at an advantage, even if he's 15 feet away from the hoop. He has the fake around the body and makes defenders look the other way like he's Larry Bird. I mean, this guy's tool bag is ridiculous. And his handle isn't at Chris Paul level, but I think it can be. And it's just everything else I'm seeing from him. I don't see – shooting is the only thing that isn't perfect right now, but that's like a B+. I literally think everything else is an A or an A+. I don't know how he doesn't succeed, and now how he's not a multi-time All-Star at the next level.
Yeah, well, I like him. He's obviously the guy in this draft. I just dread. I hope that a good team trades for Cleveland's pick.
OKC.
I just dread that he goes to the Cleveland Cavaliers, because it'll be a while before we see an All-Star come out as an All-Star out of the Cavs. If you want me to go on a little bit, or with what I see,
switch.
There's 2 things that stick up. Hey, Shay, I like the guys on a treadmill. I never heard that one before. That's a good one for a guy for weak side help. I like that one.
Thanks.
That one. Put that into my repertoire.
Okay.
I think what I'm seeing is NBA bodies all over the place, and Kate Cunningham, Jalen Green, Jalen Suggs, Jonathan Kuminga, Scotty Barnes. These guys are physically at a very young age already there in terms. Like you look at Tatum or Jalen Brown, or so many guys. I mean, they took a little while for their bodies to catch up to the NBA. Wow, these guys are really powerful specimens going in. The other thing is that stands out to me is that of the maybe top 10, 3 of them in the G League right now, and that's pretty interesting. That Jalen Green's coming out, Jonathan Kuminga, they're coming out of the G League, where they've got a level of experience that is beyond even what Cade Cunningham's going to have coming out of Oklahoma State. And so I see, other than Cade Cunningham, my favorite guy is Jonathan Kuminga, and I think at 6'8", and the way he moves and the way he looks a little more polished than Precious Achiuwa to me, but great acceleration on his moves and power to the hoop, a great awareness with his head up, a powerful player that is agile and got good athletic ability. I think he is a frontline player to plug into an NBA roster immediately next year. So he'd be my guy. I hope Biddies picking up there.
I'm very high on Kuminga, and I think that you're 100% right. He's one of these 8, 9 guys that's on there, absolutely deserving. You named some of them, Jalen Green, all these other guys. And what you said about just being NBA ready is something that we're not used to for this sheer number of players. And it's really exciting because when I look at all of these guys, maybe shooting, but even that, there's not a specific weakness. Usually it's like things like defense. That's certainly not the case with these 8 to 10 guys. They're all upside as all NBA level defenders, in my opinion. So I just think these players could change the trajectory of a franchise quickly. And I think it's really exciting. And to talk about Kuminga, I mean, he's crazy with Jalen Green. And I think, what's the third guy, the third recruit? That's Knicks, yeah. Deshaun Knicks or whatever it is. I forget his name. But
he's a point guard.
Deshaun Knicks, there it is. The 3 of them, I'm probably going to watch more G League this year than I'm going to watch Charlotte Hornet games.
I'm excited to see how it goes because I think that just that focus on their development as professional prospects and tuning out so much stuff on the side that it intertwines with the college game. TBD on what it's going to mean for these guys' careers, and it's going to take a few classes to really understand what the G League development team is, if it's a positive or a negative for the game. But I'm excited to see something new that I think there are some definitely some good reasons why it should work out for these guys.
So to focus specifically on Kuminga, you're absolutely right. He probably has one of the more impressive bodies and frames out of these top guys. 6'8", 7-foot wingspan. I think he's at 210, 220 already. He's big, athletic, strong. He's frenetic and powerful. Bringing up Precious Achiuwa is an interesting discussion. He's way better than Precious. It's not close, but there are similarities there. And just
the intangible that Precious Achiuwa has got is I challenge anybody to make to get to. And until I actually see it, I think Precious Achiuwa has got a motor that is so extreme that it's Montrezl Harrell, so that you don't know when you're looking at Kuminga whether he's got a Montrezl Harrell motor. I can see that in Precious Achiuwa, and I think so. I don't to say he's way better. I'm not saying that right away. I don't think he would play. Maybe he's a big time player. He's a big time player.
I'm in on him having that high level motor. I don't know if it's going to be like 99th percentile, but I think he can defend 3 through 5, and I mean 2 through 4, and maybe 5. He does struggle with elite ball handlers, but even then he's been able to contain. He can handle the ball in the open court. He's a surprisingly adept passer. I just think he's surprisingly fluid. The way he explodes off the floor. I mean, he might have a decently deep bag in terms of his ability to handle the ball and his trickery and his spin moves and his stagger steps that he has when he's attacking the rim. I'm really excited about him. My Frankenstein comp was Jason Richardson and Paul Millsap. I think that
more athletic than Millsap.
Yeah, well, that's why you take that from the Jason Richardson side. Thanks that you take that from the Paul Millsap side. I think that he's a little bit harder to tell where his IQ is in terms of reading a defense. I think he has some tools and some instincts there, but I do think that he needs that end to be a little bit more polished. So hopefully, depending on what the landing spot is, that team can brush that off. But at the end of the day, I think he could be this exactly what the league is going for. I was reading through all the GM interviews post draft, and now that some free agency signings have gone, and there was a common thread among maybe 5 or 6 of them where teams were targeting just versatility, and that's been the name of the game in this modern NBA, and being able to defend multiple positions on defense, and then at the same time being able to be a Swiss Army knife, a mold of clay on offense, and fit into a system, whether if it's a high caliber one with a good coach and good fluidity from top to bottom, that a player can be maximized in their role And Kuminga is absolutely deserving of headliner praise as one of these guys that are going to fit this exact description for what these teams' hopes and desires for improvement for their rosters. I mean, all of these guys encapsulate all of that together, and I'm really excited.
It'll be an interesting decision, I think, that teams are going to have in terms of, we just talked about these 5 guys, and I think Jalen Suggs needs to be talked about too, because he's a player, and I've been watching him for a while.
Why don't we?
Anyway, what I think, what I wanted to point out is that teams are going to have a decision to make with these NBA, because you got guys that don't have the same body that are really good. I mean, Evan Mobley, PJ Boston, Zion Williams, I think the guy is named from Stanford, that have. They don't have NBA ready bodies, so to speak, but they're really gifted players. And are you gonna be trying to project with them, or are you gonna just bypass them and go with the body and say, man, I don't care. Evan Mobley might be a big time player, but I'm going with Scotty Barnes because that guy is powerful and he can play right away. Maybe
well, this draft, despite it having Cade, who nominally will probably be listed as a point guard, it's all swings. It's 2, 3, 4s, players that are versatile, just like I was saying. Scotty Barnes, I comped him with Rodman and Anton Jameson is my Franken comps for Scotty Barnes. So I like Scotty Barnes, but it's a wing heavy draft, which is making the GMs across the league drool. But there's definitely one guard ahead of the pack that I've seen as high as 2. And usually he's somewhere 2 to 10 in this range. Gonzaga point guard, Jalen Suggs. Biddies, I know you watched the 2 games that he's played so far, one of the only prospects that's played multiple games. He's been exciting. What have you liked about him, and how do you think he's going to translate to the next level?
Yeah, I'm definitely not as plugged in on the high school game as you guys are. So flip on the Gonzaga Kansas game on Thanksgiving. It's number 1 versus number 6 in the country. Yeah. So he's making his debut in a big time game. Not that it's a slight to Cade Cunningham, but he's not playing against Texas San Antonio. He's playing against the Jayhawks. So here he is in this huge spot immediately to start his career. He goes out, he scores, I think it was 24 points, gets 8 assists, 4 rebounds, does an excellent job at attacking the basket, plays with a lot of control, a lot of confidence. In terms of his athleticism, I think it was similar to what you were talking about with Cunningham, where he wasn't jumping at the gym and being amazing, but he can get up there for an alley-oop at only 6'4", and played some good defense. During the first game against Kansas, it was a back and forth game where Kansas kind of chipped from like 7-point deficit to 3-point deficit, and then Gonzaga put them away late. The next day against Auburn, he was not quite as impressive. He was just taking a back seat as they blew out Auburn, and a couple of the veteran Gonzaga guys put up big days that were kind of just independent of him. But I was just really impressed to see a guy make his debut, and in a 1 versus 6 matchup, he was the best player on the floor. And I don't think that a lot of guys could do that.
One thing that I see from is really, really strong is that you couldn't possibly tell that guy's a freshman. He looks like he's playing as a senior, and he looks like a veteran player, and he's on Gonzaga, which is a team that's going to have veteran players already, but he plays like a veteran player immediately. And I'm telling Shay, I followed him because Chet Holmgren is probably my favorite player that isn't available yet. And Jalen Suggs they played together on their AAU team. I don't think they went to the same high school. I don't believe they did, but they played all their AAU ball together.
Minnehaha.
The what?
That's the name of their team. Minnehaha. It's like the Minnehaha.
So it was the same high school.
I think so.
Yes, he went to the same high school as Chet Holmgren. Think of that. But he's and so I've watched stuff like Spend a Day with Chet Holmgren, Spend a Day with Jalen Suggs, where you're seeing them out in their environment, and he is really a tremendous teammate, and he's a guy that gets along, he's talking up his teammates, whether they're all the way down to the manager on the team. He's talking up on their value to the team. And what I just said about him playing like a veteran at a very, very young age, and he's got the NBA body too. I can see him almost more than Cade as a ready-made point guard in the NBA. Cade, as good as he is, I think he may be pushed off the point guard position. He may be.
Whatever you can do, you can do whatever you want with Cade. He can play 3 positions starting tomorrow.
Yep.
I like Gonzaga. I don't watch a lot of college basketball. This year is probably going to be the most college basketball that I've watched in a while, purely because of these guys at the top. But out of all the games that I've watched, only a couple teams have played twice. But Gonzaga is my pick to win it all at this point. I mean, I love those 2 bigs. Kisper and Tilly. Yeah. Timmy. His name's Timmy. Yeah, both those guys. Those guys fit great, and they kind of have. They're not going to be pros likely. I think Kisper might get drafted from what I read, probably like a 2nd-round guy. But they have good modern skill sets that mesh with an athletic scoring guard who also has good passing chops and Suggs that make me excited for him to align with similar play archetypes at the next level. I like Suggs. I don't see many weaknesses. He can be a ball hawk on defense. He showed prowess as a weak side rim protector in these 2 games. And his time at Minnehaha, he would have games where he would be a shot creator and he would call his own number, maybe to the team's detriment. And then he would have games where he was just the best passer on the floor and he was taking himself out of the discussion as someone who was going to be taking up a lot of shots. So I like him. Similar to a lot of these guys, I'm failing to find any major issues that aren't going to let him be a good player at the next level. I think in terms of Franken comps, he was one that I was less confident than the other guys. I had him like Brandon Roy and De'Aaron Fox. I think that he's fast, but he's not crazy fast. He's not going to be the fastest guy on the court. He's a very good athlete, but he's not the best athlete. I just think it's going to be really interesting to see for this year the role that he develops as probably this team's leading scorer. He'll probably average about 5 or 6 assists a game, and I'll be interested to see if he goes to the next level and if he continues to play that same role, because I think he could be a 2 as well. I think he shoots the ball good enough, and I think he's high enough IQ off ball where he understands the spacing and the movement that needs to be made in a modern offense for him to be successful. So I like him. I think that any of these guys could be the number 2 pick come next June or July, whenever the draft is. I think a lot's going to depend on this season. It's going to be very interesting to break down game tape. I mean, you just turn on ESPN and there's going to be all the college games on. But in terms of viewing the G League Ignite, I'm going to be very interesting to see how that is displayed for fans. I wouldn't be surprised if it was on NBA TV a lot, which kind of stinks because I don't have that, despite having NBA League Pass.
Maybe they'll play the Red Claws and we'll catch them on the Celtics network.
Yes, hopefully. So I'm going to be doing a lot of probably YouTubing for G League and Ignite games. And I would love to just close out with their other star acquisition and recruiting alongside Kuminga is Jalen Green. I think he's the most exciting player in this draft. He's a stick of dynamite ready to explode. And at the same time, I think his primary role isn't going to be as an athlete. I think it's going to be as a primary perimeter creator. I see him as a 2 at the next level. I think his skill set is going to be similar offensively to he's more frail than these guys, not in terms of durability, but just in terms of frame. But I see him similar to play styles as Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell in terms of the shot arsenal that he has, his ability to create his shot with a very good handle and ability to create space with crazy step back, side steps, spins, hesitations, what have you. He has it all. Offensively, he's up there with some of the better prospects we've seen. And his athleticism is after Cade's feel for the game, Jalen's athleticism is probably the top skill in this draft. his ability to play above the rim. He really is a freak athlete. He gets up for ludicrous dunks. It's crazy. Can every single one of these guys do in between the leg dunks in the game? I've seen every single one of them do it. Is that just commonplace? Just phenomenal athletes at a young level can all East Bay now?
Yeah.
Remember when LeBron did that in high school and it was the biggest deal of all time because no one had ever done that? Now every team has one.
It takes a lot of reps before you're able to do that in a way that you can actually put it into a game. I guess they just, again, I've done it 1,000 times. So when it comes to game time, it's something they can just execute.
Yeah. So to close my thoughts,
I'd rather see them take a regular layup.
Yeah.
No, I would not rather see that. But if I was coaching,
a terrible statement. Mike likes layups more than in between the legs dunks.
I'd rather coach a player that
less risk.
Yes. So just from what I've seen, I love his mentality. I think he's an antagonizer. You can tell he gets under his opponent's skin, which is something that a skill that not every one of these top prospects has. I think he has the microwave attribute that maybe not a lot of these other players do either. So offensively, because of how I project his shot forward, because of the handle and the ability to create space for himself, he's an okay passer. I'm really excited about his ability to become a primary scorer at the next level, one that is crazy athletic. And maybe defensively is where he isn't in the same tier as these other 7 or 8 guys, but he's good. He's good defensively. He's athletic. He can recover well. Side-to-side movement isn't fantastic. His turn of the hips is okay, but I think he has upside there too. I think he can definitely cover 2 positions. It's just not as versatile as everyone else, so it's hard looking there. But from what you've seen from Jalen Green, and I know with these other guys, we have a small sample of college basketball, which is slowly growing as every day passes. Crazy that college basketball season has started already. We haven't heard when the G League season is going to start. And we don't know, as we previously just discussed, how that's going to be transmitted and available. So the only sample size we have is AAU, USA basketball, and high school. So from what you've seen from Jalen Green, how excited are you in terms of how he stacks up among these other behemoths at the top of the 21 draft?
I think I'm very, very high on him. I don't agree with you in terms. I think he's got an NBA-ready body. I think he's there. He's not. BJ Boston is thin, but I think he's got plenty of a body, and I just really want to see how this plays out. Guys go to the G League, they get that competition. So when I'm watching him play, it's just like he's doing it against better athletes than Jalen Suggs is going to do in the Gonzaga's conference. So to make them your number 1 team in the country is always shaky because they're going to be playing a bunch of teams that they're going to be 30-0, and they're not going to be as good as a Villanova or a University of Virginia team that might be 26-4. I think when I'm looking at Jalen Green and I'm seeing the competition that he's playing against, he's ready, and I think his body's ready too. I like him a lot. He'd be with him and Cunningham, Jalen Suggs, and Kamiga. They're my top players that I'm looking at. Although I like Evan Mobley quite a bit. I just don't think his body's ready to play yet.
Biddies, you like Jalen Green?
I've not done enough homework. I only watched like a 5-minute YouTube video highlight tape. So got to watch his real game, see what he might need room for improvement in and how he affects it. So I'll get back to you on that one.
Definitely. And I mean, comparing, and we can close out the discussion. You compared Jalen Green's body being more ready than BJ Boston. Do you think that's just because he's more toned? I mean, these players, I think they're both 180, 185, 190. Yeah. They're both 6'6", 6'7". BJ Boston has a longer wingspan, but it's like the difference between 6'11" and 7'2".
I'm seeing BJ Boston, and I'm seeing more Ingram than I'm seeing Jalen Green. I think if Jalen Green is he looks fairly physical to me. He looks like he's pretty. Looks like he competes. Looks like he.
And I guess maybe that's a hazy lens to view because he plays with that ferocity, whereas BJ Boston's a little bit more reserved on the court. I think he fits into the realm of having an NBA ready body too. But these guys are super exciting. I'm so happy to have this type of scouting and research to do throughout the season. And we don't know what new prospects are going to arrive on the scene. Every year there's the Trey Youngs and the Halliburton was established, but got guys that are going to rise up draft boards and end up being lottery picks that formerly weren't even top guys. I think
knock on wood, we'll get a tournament this year. You guys were talking about it last episode that there was no tournament, and that kind of skews the draft analysis. So hopefully we'll get a tournament this year and be able to see a guy emerge from that as well.
It's certainly quite a situation we're in. You've got last time I checked, over 30 teams that can't play because of COVID right now. I just watched San Francisco play 4 games in 5 nights. That at the Mohegan Sun bubble, they brought a bunch of teams in there. Didn't even tell them who they were playing. They told San Francisco that you could be playing any one of 3 teams, stand by. And Virginia was supposed to play Maine and Florida. They ended up playing Townsend State and in San Francisco, and one was changed 24 hours before game time that Maine had to head home with COVID. So I think going forward, you've got a whole lot going on there, and it's different than the NBA playing the bubble. You're starting to see it play out a little bit in the NFL. The other thing I would say is that this I'm getting really tired of manufactured crowd noise. I'm done with that. I'd rather hear the squeak of the sneakers and the coaches talk than the manufactured crowd noise. Get rid of it. I don't want to see it no more. But I think what I just experienced, I didn't experience it in the bubble. I did not experience it even with Major League Baseball. And I didn't really experience it with NFL football. Where I did experience it is with the Masters Golf Tournament. And I'm a real golf fan. So, and that usually is like the pinnacle of my golf experience for the year is watching the Masters at Augusta National in Georgia. It was not the same. Without the fans there, I was like looking at a different course. Instead of looking at the mecca of golf, it was like, I never seen this course before because there were no people on it. And there was no response to what's going on. I'm worried that in the NCAA, that when you get to March Madness and you take away the bands and you take away the student sections and you take away that enthusiasm that's in it, that we're going to see something different. And it may not live up to the expectations that we have of March Madness. It may be completely different. I hope they get that far, is what I'm hoping.
It's going to be a rocky road, tricky landscape. I think there's going to be a lot of hiccups, probably a lot of teams that are going to get games canceled. We're not going to see matchups that we're excited to see. I mean, I was copying down Cade's schedule into my phone calendar, and then I was halfway through realizing there's a good chance 60% of these games aren't on this day or aren't played at all. So it could be all for naught. But we're going to play with what we've got. We're going to see how things develop. I think it's going to be exciting, and these guys are going to be future NBA stars, whether they play 20 games, 5 games, or 30 games at the college level. So it's just extra additive to your scouting profile for these guys, everything that we have for a sample moving forward. But with that said, let's close this out. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen. Uncle Mike, Biddies.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're going to do this very, very soon. Cheers and farewell.
Thanks.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
that turkey soup, Uncle Mike.
Take care, Biddies.